right, so we have a very quick live lesson today, our Math Moments with Mrs. Moody. This is the Algebra 1, Module 1, Lesson 1 live lesson. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to talk about vocabulary. Yay! So when you're taking notes, if you do not have vocabulary written down, you are going to struggle more than you need to. So one of the things you want to do is you want to go through the whole lesson. You can use those guided notes that have the vocabulary words in them, or you can go through and you can look for the words that have the hyperlink. When you click them, the little box comes up. But these are the vocabulary words here in the Module 1, Lesson 1, 1.01. We have algebraic expression, variables, base, exponent, terms, factors, coefficient, constants, order of operations, substitution, sum, and difference. So make sure you have all of these written down, and there's a couple of things I want to point out, two. The first is in coefficient. It's very important that if you do not see a number in front of the variable, it does have a coefficient. It's just the coefficient is a number 1. We call it the understood 1. It's invisible. We don't write it because we're all very lazy and we don't want to write a 1 if everybody just knows there's a 1. So make sure that you understand that if you just see an X, it's really 1X. The second is with constants. Constants are numbers that do not have variables. So they are by themselves without a variable, and they're called constants because their value is fixed. Like a 6 is a 6, a 4 is a 4. There's nothing you can do to it. It has no variable, so it's not going to change its value. And then the last thing I want to point out is order of operations. So most people have learned PEMDAS, and in elementary school and even some in middle school, that is pretty simplistic, but there's a little bit more to it. The first is multiply and divide. That is not multiply first and then divide. It is multiply and divide from left to right. Same with addition and subtraction. It's not add then subtract. It's add and subtract from left to right. Now, if you go through and you do all of the notes and all of the examples and all of the practice, then you will be able to do these things. You will be able to identify the different parts of an algebraic expression. You'll be able to rewrite algebraic expressions in different ways by creating equivalent forms and simplifying them. You'll be able to evaluate algebraic expressions using substitution, and you'll be able to create algebraic expressions from words and phrases. Finally, you'll be able to create and interpret algebraic expressions in terms of the context. So let's take a look at the different parts. So this is objective number 1. There are 5 different parts to algebraic expressions. The first one that we can look at is the variables. So variables are the letters, for lack of a better word, that can change depending on the circumstances. And so you'll see here that they've done a nice job color coding, which those of you who come to my live lessons, you'll know I'm all about color coding. Woo, color coding. Then we also have terms. So terms are variables and constants, or variables and coefficients that are being multiplied or divided together. If you see an adding or subtracting symbol, that separates terms. So you'll see here the first term is 2x squared. It has a coefficient, it has a variable, and it has an exponent. Because there is only multiplication here, this is one term. Then you see a subtraction sign. That indicates there's a new term. This term has a coefficient of 3 and a variable of y. Then you see another subtraction sign. This indicates another term. This term is negative z, or subtracting z. And then you see an addition sign. That indicates another term. And this term is a constant of positive 6. So understanding how many terms there are is extremely important for later on in pre-algebra and in algebra. So then we have factors. The factors are the parts of the terms. So the factors in the first term are 2 and x squared. Now, yes, the 2 is an exponent, but it's part of the base. So the factors here are 2 and x squared. The factors here are -3, because the negative is attached to the term, -3 and y. And the factors here are -1, because remember, there's an understood 1 in front of that z, and 6. And because there is only one number here, it's +6, there's only one factor. It's just 6. I mean, technically, I suppose you could break it up into the factors of 6, but it doesn't, there's more than one way to do that, so that doesn't really do us any good. Then we have coefficients, which 2, -3, and -1, and then the constant right here. So by using these visuals, you should be able to identify any parts of any algebraic expression. Now for the second objective, which is rewriting expressions. So there's one key piece to rewriting expressions. The key piece to that is combining like terms. So anytime you are going to be rewriting expressions, one of the big things you're going to look at is combining like terms. Another thing you'll look at is writing different operations, so inverse operations, but for the most part, you're really going to be focusing on combining like terms. So the key here is that like terms have the same variable. That includes having the same exponent or powers. So when you're going to rewrite expressions, first, reorder the terms. You want terms, like terms, to be next to each other. And this is the commutative property of addition. You can move things around as long as it's all addition. And even if you see subtraction, subtraction really just means that you're adding the opposite of a number. So that's technically addition. And then after you reorder them, you can combine those terms by adding or subtracting. Then our next objective is evaluating by substitution. So this is when somebody or you're given a variable. Sorry, I'm sure I'm distracting you by this. I need to turn this off. This is not okay. My little pointer. Okay. So you get a value to put in for an expression. Once you have put in that value, substituted that value, then you follow order of operations. Now, here is another piece that is more complex than when you first learn about order of operations. So P stands for parentheses, but really it means grouping symbols. Okay, so you may have things in parentheses. You also may have something like the distributive property where you have things grouped together. You may have a fraction where there's something in the numerator that is grouped together because it's in the numerator together, or something in the denominator that's grouped together by being in the denominator. So just because it says parentheses doesn't mean only parentheses. Parentheses means anything that is grouped together. Then, of course, exponents and multiplying and dividing from left to right, then adding and subtracting from left to right. And if I had to give one thing that students don't pay attention to, it's the negatives. Please make sure you do not drop your negatives. I highly recommend that you rewrite all subtraction as adding a negative number. Put a parentheses around that negative number, and that will help eliminate dropping your negatives. And lastly, writing algebraic expressions and writing them in context and interpreting them requires you to know what operations each word means. So this is just an example. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the most common that you may see, words that mean certain operations. So if you see words like total, sum, altogether, in all, that is an addition word. Words like difference, less, take away, remove, how much more, how many more, those are subtraction words or phrases. Product, twice, 3 times, times, how many times bigger, how many times smaller, how many times more, how many times less, that is multiplication. Quotient, split, divide, share, distribute, cut, half, have, thirds, fourths, fifths, that those words indicate division. And something really, really important for algebraic expressions is knowing when to put things in parentheses. So if you see quantity, the quantity, something, 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 the quantity x plus 2, the quantity z minus 4, that has to go in parentheses. If you see the sum of something, 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 the difference of something, 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 the product of something, 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 that has to go in parentheses. So it's like the product of 3 and 4. Well, then you'd have to put 3 times 4 in parentheses. Or the sum of x and